Gabe, thank you for joining me on the Beyond Work podcast.
Happy to. Great to be here.
Can you give us a few words to tell us who you are, who you work for, and what you do these days?
Sure. So I'm Gabe Burke, and I'm with Accenture, and I'm part of I lead the Portfolio Strategies group, which is part of the Real Estate and Workplace Solutions practice. And lately, as you can imagine, we're helping companies figure out how to optimize their real estate footprint, which is a bigger challenge than ever.
It's a huge challenge, and you just talked about it on stage, and I want to ask you a few questions about it. But first, I want to say how lucky I feel to be in a room with you, because we used to be Zoom buddies at the very beginning of the pandemic when I was hosting this monthly think tank-like conversation with a lot of leaders, and you were a big part of it. And I guess for the past 3 years, we've looked at each other's journey, what we were seeing back then, how we started seeing more data and fact, and how we revamped our own thinking. And you've been posting and writing a lot of articles for the past 3 years. I would love to ask you to tell us a little bit of your own journey, of how you approach workplace, portfolio, and where you are today.
I think that the story of today, well, there are 2 stories that emerged from the pandemic. By the time 2022 hit, the story had emerged that, we just don't need this much space anymore. And that started to take hold. I think the story of 2023 is return to office mandates simply do not work. And that is something that I've been talking about quite a bit. And the reason I say that so confidently is that the data are absolutely crystal clear. Every RTO mandate pretty much has been a failure. And despite monumental efforts from leaders, from other stakeholders in the industry, there are a lot of service providers who make their living off office occupancy, and politicians too, who are impacted in their communities because of retail and other businesses. Despite all of that heavy pressure, nothing has changed. We're half of pre-pandemic. It's not better, and it's not going to get better with the solutions we have. So
it sounds like we are at a crossroads. We can either force it some more, because today we hear that most companies don't have repercussion when people are not coming,
right.
Or we can embrace it. Where do you stand, or what do you see happening?
Oh, there's no question we have to embrace it. I think some companies, that's a good point you brought up, because many companies are doing a mandate, but what does that mean? What does a mandate mean? In many cases, it's more like peer pressure. I think some have started to dip their foot into repercussions, and some have said, well, we will now take your attendance under consideration when it's time for promotion. I don't think anyone's drawn a hard line. I think if they do, it'll be an enormous mistake. I think they will have attrition off the charts. And so what we need to do is figure out what is the smart solution. And frankly, I don't think it'll come from the C-suite. I think it will come from corporate real estate professionals. The C-suite's teams, the people they hired to manage real estate, they are the ones who I believe can create the right solutions. And we touched on it today in our talk. Some of the conventional wisdom that came out after the pandemic, that's been repeated many times, is turning out not to be completely true. For example, we all thought that, well, it's all about us space now, let's get rid of the me space. And the truth is, the companies that are implementing a combination of collaboration but also good heads down space are getting more occupancy, regardless of the mandate. Even companies that have no mandate at all, people choose to come in if they can get that heads down. So I think that's where it has to go. It has to be through experimentation, following the data, watching what works, and then creating solutions from that.
It's really fascinating because it gives even more light and power to the conversation we have. If we're gonna have a bigger role to play. Then we need to learn from others and interact and learn from other people's experiments, because we cannot try all those experiments ourselves all the time. Is it what gives you the drive to write, to share your thought leadership, to come to those conferences, to create a narrative that they can listen to without being aggressive?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reason that I publish articles is that I feel like many times there are trends that we see unfolding in our industry and we know about them, but somehow the C-suite and many other people in business don't really see it yet. You know, like we know it's there, but if you talk to someone outside our industry, they don't quite get it. It doesn't get to them for another year or something. You know, a year later, they're saying stuff to us that we've been talking about for quite a while. So when I publish, it's usually about, here's the trend, right? Like, guess what? We've got way too much space. We need to downsize. Guess what? RTO mandates don't work. I'm trying to kind of give everyone a heads up about what we're talking about at the water cooler in our industry.
Yeah, I'm so happy you talk about it, because I had that same experience when I went to an HR conference. The thing they were talking about were so disconnected from what we are talking about. They're talking about getting people together and creating culture and the importance of culture. And I was like, yes, I agree with that. But where does it happen? Inside of our offices or outside? They had no answer. And I'm like, that's all we talk about.
Yeah.
Creating spaces for you or not. And I was like, how come? How surprised I was that the HR people team and workplace team are not more in symbiosis together. Yeah. Have you seen that yourself?
It's funny. One thing I've noticed about corporate real estate, and I've been in the industry 25 years, is that no one can really figure out to whom we should report. You know, it's like, ask a CRE person, who do you report to? Sure, CFO, HR, IT, sometimes the CEO, even legal. And I think it's because we're everywhere and we're nowhere. We don't really fit in a certain silo, and it's a big challenge because we need to reach all those people, right? We need to reach every single one of them. And I think what you said doesn't surprise me at all, because in these different silos of business, they just don't have the exposure in many cases to what we do and why we do it.
Maybe that would be my last question. You also a dad, right?
I am.
How do you think you can create a path of success for your own children? Do you think we should help them create a discipline to work out of anywhere? Because we don't know if the future would be an office or not an office, but teaching them that they will need to learn to embrace different places, or do we need to force them onto a path, which is remote work or office work or hybrid? How do you approach it with your own children?
Yeah. So the problem with that question is it assumes that my children listen to me at all, which I promise you they don't. I think the answer is a little bit of both. So it's very important work from anywhere is never going away. Everyone has to understand how to be flexible and figure out how they work best and find their best environment for work. But we cannot abandon the, I will say, skill of working in person. And it is a skill. And many people noticed that when they finally started coming back to the office from the pandemic, they felt a little awkward, right? And so we need to make sure that the workforce we train for the future is doing both, that they understand how to work by themselves and that they have the skills to work in person.
I think we want to go on an hour-long conversation on just that, because it's so highlighting the fact that it's not about responsibility. A lot of people say, your responsibility is to be in the office because of your impact on the company and the retail business around. But there's also this idea that as a society, we need to learn to get together, because technology could allow us to be in our own bubble, never meet any other human beings, and do all the things and work. But actually, there is a skill to get together, to be part of a community, part of a collective, and we need to relearn that.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Gabe. It was amazing to have you with me.
It was a pleasure.